Our capital suffered insurrection by those who doubt an official election. On January 6th, they showed true disaffection. They would have never lived if they had my complexion. Well, civility needs a resurrection, and those guilty thugs a house of correction. I just pray for a national day of genuflection. And what doesn't kill us by guns kills us dead by infection. Now what? Hello, podcast listeners. This is Dr. Alex G. Now, I know this sounds like a much different intro than what you're used to hearing on Black Like Me. And don't worry, we're coming back with all of that next week. But I'm entitling this episode, The Black Like Me Mic Check. Now, I'm a pastor, so that means I lead worship gatherings on weekends. And when we bring our band together and our singers, and I'm fortunate to have a great band and fantastic singers, but they arrive before the congregants do. Not that we're not gathering yet, but typically pre-COVID, they would gather before the congregants and they would test the mics to make sure that sound was impeccable, that the harmony was on, so that they were really ready to give the community, their community of faith, their very best. It wasn't a real performance. It was sort of a warm-up, but it was to make sure that the equipment was working right. So I'm entitling this Season 5 Mic Check. I'll use it also as a precursor to give you a sense of what's coming this exciting season. So since we've last gathered between the end of Season 4 and now, so much has happened. It actually took me a little longer to come back to Season 5 because Season 4 was so exhausting, not because it was so much work, but just being inundated with all that was happening in the world, in the media, in the community, in my own heart, my soul, my mind, actually my dreams. It's taken me a little bit to come back, to muster up the energy, to begin talking about these things, because I don't want to talk, as my mom used to say, just to hear myself talk. I want to talk in order to help people to think differently, and to take action. So the focus of Season 5 is going to be, now what? We have seen so much in our world in the last year. The pandemic, quarantine, the onset of visible, or even more visible, more widely visible violence on Black folks. The fact that Black folks were hit so hard by COVID. The fact that Black folks are doubting the vaccine, that there is a vaccine. Is it for us? There's just so much that's going on. And so I'm just asking, now what? Not the least of which is that we have new occupants at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue. We have a new president and a new vice president, a history-making team. And then the accusations about the fake news and the fake elections and the rigged elections. So much is going on. I just want to be that voice that's saying to people, we can't sleep on this one, folks, because just because things have been exposed doesn't mean that they've been fixed. A diagnosis is not a prognosis. And so the season is really focusing on the question, now what? Are we really woke, or are we sleepwalking? Have we really seen what we've seen? Has it really triggered change inside of us? I want to know. You know, it's interesting. During the threat of the Cold War, the United States was dealing with this potential conflict with the Soviet Union. But there was a little something plaguing America at home that weakened America's integrity to challenge, let's say, communist countries like the Soviet Union. And that was racial unrest, the rise of civil rights. And so we look at history and we just think, you know, Kennedy and LBJ, people just figured, you know, it's time we just wake up and all get along. But when you begin to read between the lines and read history, you'll understand that people around the world were saying, well, America, where's your integrity to challenge the Soviet Union or other countries about the treatment of its people? You can't even treat your own Black people well. It's sort of like spoiled kids jumping up and down on furniture and embarrassing their parents who are child psychologists or educators. You would think that they could get their own children in check because they're taking care of other people's children. It's sort of like preachers' kids who go wild. It's like, oh, They're talking to everyone else about morality and just look what he's doing and look what she's doing. It was really the threat that civil unrest in the United States would weaken America's position, its voice to speak against what it called atrocities around the world. And that put pressure on American leaders to deal with issues of civil unrest and its civil rights leaders. There was external pressure to deal with things. I'll give you another example. During the civil rights era in the early 60s, Birmingham, Alabama was called Bombingham. There were some 70 odd bombings that took place. And against black people and against protesters and against freedom riders. It was just a horrible, horrible time. So the president of the Chamber of Commerce from Birmingham, was at a business meeting in Japan. While he was there, Bull Connor had pulled back police protection for folks coming into Alabama on one of the freedom buses. The KKK bombed the bus, attacked the bus, and actually held back police and rescue squads for about 15 minutes to let this go on. It was ugly. It was horrible. So while the Chamber of Commerce president was in Japan, the business leaders, the Japanese business leaders and other leaders around the world looked at him as if to say, what the hell? What are you all doing there? The pressure was so immense, it was palpable, that as much as the Chamber of Commerce president hated black, he loved him some green. So he came back and they started desegregating Birmingham because they did not want to be shunned by the international business world because they wanted to sell Birmingham steel so that it could become a world-class city. What am I saying? Why am I talking about the Cold War? Why am I talking about the 1960s and the Chamber of Commerce president in Japan? Because a lot of right has been done for wrong reasons. A lot of right has been done for reasons of publicity and economic gain. That type of change is not long-lived. And what we do with what we have now seen, what we have recently seen, must be a significant about face, or we're going to make other cosmetic changes, and then another generation of people, our children and children's children, will inherit our cowardice, our fear, and our greed. And so we need to make sure that the change we are making today is not because America is now considered a joke in many places of the world. Its race relationships and its ability to speak against injustice and trafficking and civil crimes around the world. People are saying, listen, America, clean up your own damn house. Then come and talk to us about our mess. And so I think it is time for America to clean up its own damn house. But I'm asking, now what? What are the strategies and steps that we really need to take now in order to make sure that we are in a position to learn from what we are experiencing and become a tremendously powerful nation where all people can dream and live well enough to see those dreams actualized? So I want to talk about racism unveiled and disparity revealed. That's what's happened. It was not created last year. It was there. And the perfect storm, and you heard me talk about it last year. And if you're new to the podcast, you've got to really take some time to listen to last year. It'll probably be hard to go all the way back, although I encourage you to do so. But you've got to really listen to 2020. Racism was unveiled because Black people have been trying to tell folks it's there, it's there, it's there. And disparity has been revealed right down to the impact of COVID-19 on Black people, on Native American people, on Asian people, on Latino people. And not just through the sickness, but even the attacks launched against us. Particularly what we've seen with our Asian American elders being attacked by in society in broad daylight. It's crazy. And so I want you all to understand these things weren't new. These things aren't new, but they've been unveiled. They've been revealed. So I want to talk in this mic check about 5 fears that I have. And this is to set us up for season 5, which I can't wait to officially launch into next week. Fear one, that people will forget what they've seen and heard. That's a real fear of mine because we have seen a lot. People saw the attacks on Black people and their allies on the Edmund Pettus Bridge, and they were national news carried it. It actually moved some white folks to come to Alabama to participate in the civil rights movement because they didn't know that that was happening. It was televised when at a sit-in demonstration that white women, college students who decided to sit with Black students, fellow Black students, that they were scalded with hot coffee, just as the Black people were. But the news cameras had not caught innocent, lily white women be innocent. I am not belittling their commitment because it was very key. It was strategic in how America responded. But when white women came and they had hot coffee thrown on them along with their Black colleagues, America saw that and said, "Oh, she's innocent." Well, they're innocent too. They began to realize how egregious these actions were, and laws started changing in many states, in many cities, across many scores of diners that had been segregated. Change came because people saw it. So what has happened that we've forgotten what we've seen? Because it's in black and white, we think that it was ancient history and that we've licked the problem and that it's been fixed. Do we think that by changing legislation, we have changed hearts and people don't think that way anymore? Where is the legislation that has illegalized the KKK? Where is the legislation that has illegalized, or how long did it take to illegalize lynching? I don't even know. Has it even been formally outlawed? The Constitution gives you the right to enslave people if they are incarcerated. And so I just need people to understand that we've got to wake all the way up. Wake all the way up and not just bat your eyes and say, I'm awake, I'm awake. Like when you're driving and you're dozing, or you're watching a movie with someone and they say, hey, you're dozing. No, I'm not. No, I'm not. You think that just by batting your eyes, you're awake. You can't recount the last 5 minutes of the plot of that movie or the plot. So we got to do more than bat our eyes. We got to wake the hell up. And so my fear, number one, is that people will forget what they've seen. We're going to get the vaccines. America's going to open. Businesses are going to open. White people can get their hair done and their nails done like they want to. I know a lot of people want to do that, but I got to make fun of that woman that was saying, I want my hair done. And then we're going to forget, because when we're not glued to our computers and we're not locked into our homes, my fear is that we're going to get back to our comfortable lives. That people who would be white allies will get back to their comfortable lives and they can see their grandparents and their parents. And these are beautiful things. I'm not belittling it. But I'm fearful that when your lives become comfortable again, you will forget what's been happening to Black people, Asian people, Latino people. That's a real fear of mine. Memory is fickle. It's selective and it's protective. It will get rid of things that we don't want to remember because it's too painful. We will remember things that we want to remember. I read, I followed this account on Twitter that's called Facts. And one of the facts I read one day was that our memory is constantly recreating memories. So the way I think of something today might be completely different than the way I thought about it 13 years ago. And that's why people can say, no, I put my keys right here. No, I never said that. And then tapes come out and clips come out and you're like, oh my gosh, I did say that. It says that our memory is constantly recreating reality and recreating itself. That's scary. So fear one is that people will forget what they've seen because memory is so fickle. Fear number two, that people will think that we're back on track as a nation. Trump is gone. We've got new people, in office. We've talked about this. And listen, I'm glad that we've got a new start. But can I just be really honest with you? Trump did not create the issues he exploited. Trump did not exploit the issues he created. You must go back and do a search on iTunes or under Black Like Me. And there's an episode I did after the Philly Starbucks put Black people out who were in there waiting. And I did an episode about something Trump said and about that event and Starbucks. But in that episode, I stated, Trump is not smart enough to be creating these issues. Trump is the ventriloquist doll that is sitting on America's lap mouthing things that America has been wanting to say and America has been saying for centuries. Mic check. Are y'all listening to me? Can you hear me? Caller, are you there? Are you all hearing what I'm saying? So as much as we may have detested the tweets and the things that he was saying, let me just be clear. I am not attributing the attitudes of people to Trump. Yeah, but he emboldened people. Yeah, but he made it okay. Fine. But he did not create it. Why am I stating that? Because I don't want white America thinking that issues are fixed because Trump is gone. He didn't create the issues, he exploited. He exploited issues that were already there, rules on the books, attitudes on the books. These things were already going on. Listen, there were egregious attacks, assaults on the black family through criminal justice legislation that happened during the Clinton administration. So let's not act like Democrats are a gift from God. Because most Democrats are still what? You got it, ding, 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 white. And many of them are still what? Privileged. And many of them still don't what? Know black people. So let's just stop acting like we've got a demonized party and an angelic party. We have a disease in America that's called white supremacy and white privilege. And it doesn't know any one side of the aisle. All right? So listen, so people love to hate Trump. But the people who hated Trump, are you challenging your Trumpsters in your families? Like, you can be all over social media talking about stuff and got your rally signs, but you got an aunt, don't you? Or a cousin, don't you? Or a nephew, don't you? Or a grandma, don't you? Who wants to make America great again? And so let's just tell the truth. Let's not be all over this stuff and all dogmatic on social media and places where you can speak into it. Not that you can't control your relatives, but are you at least addressing it? Does Biden really get it? Is Harris a distraction? I mean, a capable and a very brilliant distraction. But that, I'm just asking, is the statement that we've got a woman who's South Asian and she's African American, she's black, and she's a woman, so she's making so much history. And this means that we are advanced. This means that we're making motion. This means that we can't be racist, America. We are already great. In America, this can happen. Okay, but are the other women of color who are trailblazers, or even white women who are trailblazers in business, are they making the same as their white male counterparts? Are they getting the same treatment and the same advancement? Like, is having a woman as a vice president going to all of a sudden just change the minds of presidents of chambers of commerce? I'm just saying we still got work to do. That's all I'm saying. That people will think that we're back on track. Trump is gone. We're now back on track. And I'm not saying that Harris is a decoy, that she's not qualified. I am not saying that at all. But I'm also saying that by putting her in that position, by electing her, does not mean our issues go away any more than a racist company can put a VP of whatever and it's a person of color and they will say, see, we can't be racist. We can't be chauvinistic. We hired a woman. We got ourselves one. I'm just saying, come on, we got to work and we got to push Biden. We got to push our elected officials to make good on these promises. Listen, changes come down to people. Government can't fix this one, y'all. It comes down to people. So will you vote? Like you voted for Biden and Harris, a lot of us did. Will you vote in city elections, school board elections, county government elections? Will you still speak up at PTAs or PTOs or whatever they're called these days? Will you use your voice outside of federal and national elections to really let your voice be known? And listen, I know that Trump was nasty, but let me tell you something. Trump did a lot of people a favor by at least showing us where the glitches were. Because some of us have been saying, America ain't right. Leaders aren't right. Elected officials, they're not right. They're not right. They're not right. And so he just sort of pull that group together, the Proud Boys and others, to remind us, these folks are here, y'all. These folks are here. And let me tell you something about nastiness. When I was growing up, particularly for, some of us who've grown up in inner cities know that we had friends or maybe relatives who had roaches. And our families may have said, well, they don't keep a clean house. They're kind of nasty. So no, you can't go over Bobby's house because Bobby and them got roaches. Because if you know anything about roaches, if you go over people's homes with roaches, roaches travel. And they will get in your purse, in your backpack, in your shoes, in your jacket. Then the next thing you know, you got roaches at your house. Trump left roaches. Yeah, he was nasty in what he said about women, what he said about shithole countries, what he said about leaders, what he said about his opponents, what he said about members of his own party. But just because he's gone doesn't mean that he didn't leave roaches. And there were some roaches crawling up and down the Capitol on January 6th. And what was very interesting about those roaches is that they didn't cover their heads the way the KKK roaches did 100 years ago, because they didn't want you to know that we're judges and we are realtors and we're your pastors and your deacons and your school teachers and your principals. So they covered their faces. These bold roaches didn't cover their stuff because they were so convinced that the red, white, and blue would not convict them, would not charge them, would not fine them, would not publicly humiliate them, would not threaten their lives. They didn't believe that. Now, they believe that if black people descended anywhere with weapons being brandished, what would happen to them? Those insurrectionists on January 6th proved to me that they do believe that there's a difference between the way law enforcement treats people of color, black people, and white people. Those folks didn't write suicide notes. They didn't leave notes on their bed saying, honey, I've loved being your partner for these last 20 years. I've loved being your wife. I've loved being your husband. But today I must stand for what is right. I must live into my convictions. Those people didn't write those kinds of notes. You know why? Because they were coming back home. They were on vacation. They weren't expecting to go to jail. That woman from where is she? Texas, was on a chartered plane and did all that stuff and then came back and said, I'm rich, I'm getting paid, I'm good. Now she's apologizing. I'm sorry. It was the dumbest thing I ever did. It's just like, are you mad? Are you crying because you did wrong or because you got a butt whooping or you got one coming? Are you sorry because you're wrong or are you sorry because you caught? If she wasn't caught, she wouldn't be sorry. That woman was bragging about stuff that she's doing. So don't think that we're back on track just because Trump is gone. Trump's not really gone because Trump left roaches and they're crawling around. Fear number 3, that people will treat extremists like they're a rarity and not the norm. Again, I want to stress, my number 2 kind of bled into number 3, that the insurrectionists were everyday people without masks. Like I told you, Trump left roaches. Fear number 4, that people will underestimate the cost of disparity. That we need to fight disparity, not just because it's morally wrong and it's debilitating, but it's costly. For example, we're now reliving history. The stress that's called racial battle fatigue, it's a syndrome that's really being studied, or a disorder that's really being studied in schools of medicine and public health. That the stress of navigating, for people of color, navigating predominantly white space, it causes a stress, a post-traumatic stress that's often seen in those who are on the front line of battle in war. Because it's a constant sense of being guarded, fight or flight, these kinds of things that are going on. We now know that all of that stuff that happens inside of us makes our bodies, makes us more prone for disease. And so when COVID came, when the onset of COVID-19 happened, many of us were not shocked when it hit black and brown people hardest, because many of our systems are weakened, and that shows up through diabetes and hypertension and other precursory kinds of diseases that become the gateway to so many other serious diseases like cancer and, yes, even dementia. And so that's going to cost us a lot of money. Disparity is going to cost this country a lot of money, our health systems a lot of money. People also don't realize that we are reliving the pain of history. For example, folks are just assuming that because the vaccine is out, everyone's going to run to it. A lot of black people are not convinced that the vaccine is healthy. And can I just be really honest for a second? This season, you're going to hear me have a conversation with Dr. William Hartman, along with Dr. Jasmine Zapata. They're going to talk about their work in the medical trials or the vaccine trials for AstraZeneca. But what they're finding out and what they told me, and I've learned this because I co-chair the Black Brain Health Committee through the University of Wisconsin-Madison's Alzheimer's Research Department. I have found, and this scares the hell out of me, that medicines don't necessarily work the same for everyone. So that, for example, if Black people don't participate in the trials for, say, Aricept or Namenda, these are drugs used to treat Alzheimer's and dementia. I know my mom is using these meds. If Black people are not in the trials, they don't know that really works. They don't understand. I hope I'm calling this shot right, but the HPV vaccine that was given out to women in its first go round was not tested on Black women. So guess what? It was not helping Black women and it was hurting Black women. They had to pull it. They had to go back to the drawing board, test, and then put out a whole nother edition. You don't think that this happens. This shit happens. And I was told this by the doctor who is testing AstraZeneca at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. So this was not something I heard on blacknews.com or blackpropaganda.com. An MD who's trusted with testing the efficacy, the potency of this drug is talking about what happens when Black people aren't in trials. So now, why aren't Black people in trials? They pay you $50. Why aren't we in? Because trials have killed us. Because we read, we know history, the Tuskegee experiment. That thing went on into the 1970s, you all. We think that was in another life, that happened when Truman was president. Let me tell you, people were still living with the effects of the syphilis disease that wasn't treated into the 70s. The gynecological experiments that happened on Black women many times without anesthesia because it was thought in a gynecological world, the male gynecological world, that Black women had a different tolerance of pain and that certain things like, I don't know, scalpels and catheters didn't hurt Black women. What? So what's happening is if large numbers of Black people don't get vaccinated, that's going to put large numbers of white people at risk. Yeah, Black people too, but we're not just around Black people. So actually, immunization, this idea of how once we get so many of the people immunized, maybe we can get back to some normalcy. You've got people who aren't trusting of this system because of what's happened to Black people in the past. That history is hurting us today. Now, they want people like me to take pictures, getting shots, and encouraging people to do this. Listen, it's a personal choice. I decided to let the hospital take a picture of me getting my shot because I want people to know I'm taking this leap of faith. I'm trusting the process. But when they said, so why are you okay doing this? And what would you say to other people? I said, well, I would say to, and I know what they meant other Black people. I would say, well, to Black people, I would say, I affirm your fears because they're real, because it's based on stuff that's happened. This is a different process. And yes, it's faster. But there are tests that are out here, and there are regulatory bodies that we sit on, that we're a part of. And so I believe that the process is safer. The process is safer for us. So the cost of disparity is wild. I read earlier this week that this was in USA Today, that there's a CDC report out that life expectancy for Americans is at its lowest in years. But it's even lower. Guess who? It's even lower for guess who? Black and brown people. So coming through 2020, we're talking about this new normal and we're confined to our houses and people are worrying about how they're going to get their nails done and if they're going to be able to still vacation and the children getting back in schools and all of these things. Some of these things are important, not all of them. Your nails and your hair is not important, not that important. But what we have now found is that there's a residual impact of the stress of 2020 that has shortened the lives of Americans in general, but has had a profound impact on lowering the life expectancy of Blacks and Latinos. So even if we survive COVID, even if we maintain our jobs during the shutdown, even if we survive as essential workers, Even if we take our churches offline and do our work and our social services in a virtual manner, we still are more likely to die even sooner because of the impact of all of this on us. Yeah, people want to get collagen in their lips and they want to put collagen in their behind so they can look black. But y'all don't want to be black. Y'all don't want to be black. Number 5, people will think that social activity is the same as civil rights activity. Hitting a couple of keystrokes, using a pound sign, a hashtag, is not the same as voting, speaking up, and challenging issues. I told a colleague recently, a colleague who is in a powerful position in society, in our community, a colleague who is white, who will beat the drum of justice and abhors anti-black thought and anti-black activity, a person who would perhaps march and do whatever else to make sure that my rights are maintained. But yet in their power-broking circles, they sit quiet in places where they know it's been documented that the odds are stacked against black and brown people, that they are treated differently for business access, loans, or other kinds of support. They know that white ideas, plans, projects, proposals, business plans are viewed and treated differently than those of black and brown people, yet they sit silent. Yeah, King talked about this, that in the end it's not going to be the atrocities that have been launched against mean white people, but it'll be the silence of good white people. Good white people. And so I told that person, you can't be my friend and silent while you know people are closing doors on people like me. You can't come and tell me this is so unfair, I see injustice, and you have power and access and you sit quietly. I don't want to be your friend. I don't want to talk to you about it. I don't want you to have access to me. I don't need you. So you feel exonerated because you have a strong black friend, but you're a strong white person until you get around your strong white friends, and then you lose your voice, your authenticity, your conviction, your integrity, and your soul. And why would I want or need a friend who has no integrity, no soul, no sense of what's appropriate, and no concern for the injustice that's happening in our world? People of color, black folks, are dying in the streets, in their beds, in their kitchens, in Walmart, in playgrounds, in their cars. And you're playing silent when you're sitting around people who can help to bring change? Talking about it is not the same as being about it. You know, people still won't work on building cross-cultural relationships, so they can't see the pain of other people. Because they're not building these cross-cultural relationships, pretty soon there'll be a numbness to what's happening to black people. It won't be on every TV channel soon. And so people go back to Netflix and Amazon Prime. Pretty soon movie theaters will open more broadly. Parks will, beaches will. And people won't be inundated with it. And because they don't know black people and brown people, they'll be out of touch, and so the pain won't touch them. When we have proximity with people, relationships with people who are hurting, we're more touched by what takes place. There's something about pain and fear that will cause us to be changed. And when we are out of touch, and so the atrocities don't cause us fear or consternation, and we don't feel the pain of colleagues because we don't have colleagues who are experiencing that fear, it's very easy to lose sight of that pain and never be touched by it. White people will say to me, well, Dr. G, I want my children to have cross-cultural experiences, but they don't live near me. Well, yeah, let's talk about the covenants. Let's talk about redlining. Let's talk about why Black people don't live near you. Is that Black people's fault? Let's talk about how our neighborhoods became so segregated. Was that just accidental or was that by design? So you can't lament what you don't have. Don't you have 3 cars? Don't you have a bus pass? Don't you have an Uber app? In a time where there are more Black people in America than any other time in history, Latino folks, Asian American folks, you can't find somebody that doesn't look like you so that your children can have cross-cultural relationships? You don't think that might be worth it? Something to think about. So listen, you all. During this season, you will hear from CEOs, physicians, activists, artists, judges, authors, political organizers, educators, social entrepreneurs, and I'll be asking them all, now what? Now what? What now? What is it going to take to get us back right, in your opinion? What are the necessary steps? Not just to put things back, but to put them back right. Because you can put something back on a shelf, but it's not the right shelf. I used to work in retail. I used to hate when people used to put eggs in hosiery or vitamins in T-shirts. Like, put it where you got it. Put it where you found it, back where you found it. So what are the necessary steps to not put things back, but to put things back right? How do we make this thing right? Trump was right on one part of his mantra. We do need to make America great. But America has never been great. And America's never been there before. And are you convinced that we can be great? That we should be great? And what are we willing to pay for the price of right? This is what I want to explore in season 5. This is what I want us to look at in season 5. This is what I want us to ponder. Because I'm going to continue asking the question, now what, America? Thank you for your support for Black Like Me. Buckle up, because season 5 is going to be fire.